Excuse me.
Oh.
I'm looking for my daughter. Have you seen her?
Did you wreck your car first?
Yeah.
Man, we really gotta plan these skits better, don't we?
Yeah, it's really, really bad. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of OMG, Older Millennial Gamers. I am, as always, Brian Olivier, and with me, almost never, is...
Matt Lotharius.
And today, we are going to be continuing our delve into Spoopy Month with today's episode, where we are going to be talking about the
spookiest of the spook.
The spookiest of the spook.
This is the definitive one. When you told me you wanted to do something for Halloween, first thing I thought was Silent Hill.
Silent Hill, that's right. The 1999 PS1 classic with a capital C. Probably the game that, honestly, when I played it for the first time, I'm not gonna joke. I hit a couple of brown notes.
I like the term nightmare fuel. I feel like this is the one that definitely brought the nightmare fuel. It's great. So this game came out 2 years after Resident Evil. So it's very much like in the same survival horror kind of genre. But I love how kind of like ideologically opposed this particular game is from Resident Evil, right? Because Resident Evil was like had a very big science bend action, but also scares, and then Silent Hill comes out and it's like eldritch horror.
Yeah,
like, it's not necessarily in like the Lovecraftian kind of thing, but there's definitely elder gods. There's definitely like elements of madness that kind of come up in there, and I really, really dig that kind of stuff. Like this game was the first one that really got me into it, which is really funny because like I wasn't even into like Lovecraft until after this game, and then someone else recommended to me like the Cthulhu mythos, and that's when I really dug in. So I have this game to thank for that.
Yes, Silent Hill, Konami, who developed and published Silent Hill.
Back when they made games.
Damn you, pachinko machines! I honestly, not to derail, but
let's not get political now.
You promised me Silent Hills, Konami.
Oh, I remember that.
You promised me the PT.
Oh.
You promised
Molto bene. Very good.
You promised it to me, Konami, and you took it away from me.
Unless you downloaded it first. Unless you downloaded it. A friend of mine did. I got to play it.
I was not one of the lucky ones. I didn't have a PS4 at the time, so I happened to miss it. But you promised me. Anyway, Silent Hill was absolutely a different tack. Like you said, Resident Evil, there was a lot of science gone wrong.
Man's hubris.
Oh, how they spit in the face of God.
Specifically, Iceman's hubris.
Iceman's hubris. That should be a category. Iceman's hubris. I like that.
We bring it forward.
Man. But
here
it was very spiritual.
Yeah.
There was almost a... There's the sense that, like you were talking of, like eldritch horror, and the spookiness came from the ideas of not knowing.
Oh, and you definitely couldn't solve your problems with a rocket launcher.
Yeah,
there was no rocket launcher.
There
solution.
was no Brad Vickers to drop you a rocket launcher to shoot, the eldritch abomination in the face. Oh, Samael,
the unholy one.
Oh man, oh my goodness, just
good old Sammy.
Don't pick up that Flauros.
Oh, psych! They hand it to you.
We'll talk about that in a little bit, but like. The idea of Silent Hill is a much more psychological affectation as opposed to like, oh, here's some zombies. Like, Romero did zombies.
Right.
And, as like a device, zombies are very much relatable to like masses, almost like lemmings. They just, they operate on a level that's almost subconscious. Whereas like, when the
stuff you see in Silent Hill, I'm like, I don't know, dude. Like, not to sound like too like nerdy about it, but like it feels like a real big existential sort of like thing, like with the game, right? Like, and so to be fair, like Silent Hill 1, even when it came out, it it had its spots. It had its ugly bits, and it had its really great parts. So I feel like this game particularly like spiked for me. It was like, oh, it was great, and then the lows were really low. In fact, there was a stretch of time where I didn't make any progress. Like I put it away and I forgot about it for like weeks because, and we'll talk about later, things we didn't like. There was literally like a key on the ground, and you would not have noticed it unless you knew to look for it.
Right. Yeah.
But to go in the opposite direction of like the highs of it was the atmosphere was just so well done. The way that you just felt like you were like being dipped into a horrific like morass of scariness. And even in the game itself, it had elements where you wouldn't realize you were like completely tense until you would defeat a boss and then realize you were back, you know, in a more safe area, right? So I guess we can start digging into a bit about it. Brian, you want to tell me a bit about the story?
Yeah, sure. So the story starts, you are Harry Mason. He is a writer. I believe there's...
Appropriate for a horror game.
I know, right? Writers as protagonists in horror games, that might be coming up specifically
Chocolate,
later.
Peanut butter, there you go.
Oh, tastes real good, just like Reese's. Please sponsor us, Reese's.
No, don't shill too hard.
Oh, sorry, I'm not shilling at all.
Don't sell for the man.
So Harry Mason is driving along the road with his young daughter Cheryl.
Oh, but
and
where'd he get his daughter Cheryl?
Well, we don't know at the time, but
wasn't there a handy cutscene that?
Oh yeah, very briefly during the Attract trailer, you see that he found Cheryl on the side of the road somewhere.
Like him and his wife were like, "Oh hey, is that a baby?
Hey, it's a baby. Let's take care of the baby."
Taking it, you know. Like, you look left, you look right. 5-second rule, my baby.
I know, seriously. Like, you find a baby, pick a baby, grab a baby, take a baby home. That's kind of the rule of the time.
I believe that was written on a lot of the what are they called? Billboards in Colorado.
The billboards.
For sure, because you can't just leave a baby on the road.
3 billboards outside of Colorado Springs. Find baby, pick up baby, adopt baby.
There you go.
That's exactly what it is. So Harry Mason with his adoptive daughter Cheryl, they are driving along the road when Harry swerves to avoid a young woman just popping right out of the middle of like a highway, like a mountainous highway road.
To be fair, it was dark and there was a lot of winding. I mean, it was easily understandable, like to be that it was because it was dark out one and it was foggy.
That's true.
But also like on the way there, you see like a motorcycle.
You see a motorcycle with a police car. Not a police car, but a police motorcycle pass by, and then as Harry drives along, he sees the motorcycle wrecked, and that distracts him for a moment, so that the young woman on the road gets out there. He swerves to miss her. He crashes his Jeep. And he winds up on the outskirts of a town called Silent Hill. It's really foggy, it's dark, some really weird shit starts happening, and then Harry finds himself, he's looking for his daughter Cheryl, who's missing. And
the main thrust of the game is to find my child.
Find my child, find that daughter.
That's pretty appropriate. I mean, that's good enough impetus for someone to go to explore Scary Town.
Yeah, I mean, as a dad myself, if my son was missing after a car crash in a very spooky, fog-riddled town,
just make sure you have your
shotgun. I gotta have my shotgun and my broken radio with me.
Broken radio. Oh, they didn't have stick with nail.
They didn't have this. That was the second game. Eventually, Harry finds a couple of other people in this weird town that seems pretty desolate and nobody is there.
But hang on, that was really great. Like I enjoyed that because it was like Americana, but like missing all the people that were around, and like it just had this great imposing feeling. Granted, you were being chased by skin monsters.
Yeah, that's true. Very skin monsters.
Copious amount of skin monsters I found while doing the artwork for this. I was like, let me see who the bad guys are. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember those. Oh yeah, I remember those. After a minute, I was like, I'm noticing a theme here.
Yep.
Skin.
Lots of skin. Monsters.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah,
I enjoyed that though, like the fact that the town was so empty. It gave you this really good, like scary feeling. You know? It's like the idea of being in like a mall at night in the dark.
Oh yeah,
and
which Silent Hill 3 does.
Oh, it does that for a portion.
It does. The very beginning starts off in a mall.
You know what I also liked? I mean, granted, we're jumping around here a bit, but like the mood and the music. The music especially. Like I'm not sure if it's the same guy, but the music felt like that guy would have like a nightmare, wake up like shivering. They would reach over to his like nightstand and write down some musical notes and then go back to bed.
or like figure out how can I recreate the sound of like just something's death rattle. Like the sound the sound in this game is amazing. BT dubs.
Definitely like on edge. almost the whole game. Even when it's silent, you're like, oh man, because you're waiting for something to happen.
Oh yeah, well, like as we talked about in the previous episode for Resident Evil didn't have much of a soundtrack. There's some ambient sounds, but a lot of what you hear is just like some moaning from a zombie.
They had that pretty amped, like, oh, there's a zombie coming to get you, or here's a puzzle getting ready to happen.
Or there's like a really weirdly like out of place, like jangled.
100% recreation.
That was direct audio from the game.
Yeah, we definitely just clipped it and played it.
That was not my mouth making really bad sounds. Whereas in Silent Hill, the music, it definitely really
very much part of the tension. Very much part of the game.
It fleshed out the actual environment very well.
Right.
So Harry comes across a few people. He gets embroiled in a weird story about a cult and about the elder gods, and Samael gets thrown around a lot. Dogs and cats living together.
That's a Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. We're hitting all the notes.
And so like that's pretty much the gist of it. Is like survive town, find child. Mm-hmm. But like along the way, prepare for nightmares, because like the first real event is you wake up and you're like looking for your daughter. You wind your way around a town, and so this is different from Resident Evil in that like Resident Evil was set cameras inside a building, tight corridors.
Yep.
Here it was a third-person camera, it's a little jank, and then they would occasionally intersperse them with set cameras, but they did them to great effect. The first real scary like beat to the game is you wander down a hallway, and that's when you know this is when all reality and sanity starts like falling off the rails, because you find like an upturned wheelchair with its just spinning wheel, creepy, and then the camera is like set up above it, and it's a little Dutch, and as you get closer, the camera follows you and it becomes much more Dutch, and by the end it's just full Dutch.
Yeah, It's actually really, I think it's one of the more effective things that it does, particularly in contrast to how Resident Evil had the fixed camera angles, like you said, because the backgrounds are not pre-rendered. Yeah. So they were fully modeled, textures, wireframes.
Poorly textured.
Very poorly textured. There's a lot of clipping in this game.
Right. And I love that janky run he did. He kind of looked like he was like constantly slipping.
Oh yeah,
his little feet would fly out.
His running animation with his giant potato feet. Oh my goodness, so great,
janky.
So janky.
Yeah.
But it allowed the camera to follow Harry as he moved through Silent Hill.
Yeah.
And there's ways that as you were saying earlier, that the camera would focus on Harry coming into a space or an area or a room, and then would follow him as he moved around. There was very few really hard cuts.
Yeah, it definitely eschewed a lot of like the issues that I had with Resident Evil, where like sometimes you were aiming down a hallway and you couldn't see what was around it, or the cuts would happen and then you would lose sight of your goal, or you had to reorient. And in here, it would reorient, but then it would give you enough space and the camera would follow you long enough where you could kind of stay where you were. I haven't got to the part I was going to tell you about. The first nightmare fuel piece is that, you wander into that alleyway, you notice the scary wheelchair, you get further in and you're like in this suddenly dark, like super dark. You just turn a corner and it's pitch black behind you. Behind those, and what's keeping you from the utter darkness, rusty chain link fence.
Oh god,
completely scary looking. And then you see like a horrible corpse like dangling from a wall, and then the skin children come up with knives and they murder you. And
no, literally, they murder you. Harry is dead,
stabbed to death. Or did you get murdered because you wake up?
You wake up in the diner afterwards.
Yeah, and that's when you meet one of the other characters.
Yes, that's when he meets Sybil Bennett, the erstwhile policewoman who was on the motorcycle that passed by Harry in the middle of the night. One of the things that I want to say about that transition is that when you're going through the alleyway, because at that point everything is still relatively bright-ish.
Well, yeah, because it's foggy, but it's like daylight.
Like it's daylight. We live in Washington, so when it's really foggy, it's just gray all the time. So like if you know what that's like, just being outside and just having it be gray but light, that's what it was like.
This is better. We're going back to Colorado. I'm not sure if you remember these days, but every couple of years there was like you were in a cloud.
Oh yeah,
I'm not sure if you remember Fog Day.
I do remember Fog Day, yes.
And I loved that.
It was so great.
The cloud was so like, whereas in Washington it's gray and you're like, oh, it's dreary. You go into Colorado during the fog days and it is like 5 feet. 10 feet in front
Max.
of you. That's all you would see. And
Max.
It was great because having played Silent Hill, oh yeah, we have fog days here in Colorado. And I could relate to it so much easier. And I would have like this great little twinge of panic every now and again, even in Colorado when fog day would happen. And it's very easy where you could walk into an area and there's literally no one around. Because
it's super.
Like you're in a parking lot or you park your car, you're getting ready to go to the store, and you look around, you're like, there's nobody in sight.
Nobody
it's
here.
5-10 feet. And then you go, oh man, am I in Silent Hill now? And I loved that feeling. It was so fun.
It's so great. And I was going to say,
like you're saying.
Oh yeah, about, you mentioned like the rusty chain link fence. Even now, whenever I see any kind of like rusted metal, like I'm immediately like, Silent Hill has just tainted rusted metal for me forever.
It definitely makes things scary for me. Like the series in general made things scary, like clawfoot tubs.
Clawfoot tubs, no.
Poorly grouted tile.
Oh gosh, it's the worst.
Scary stuffed animals. Accidentally
scary stuffed animals. I would also say that ladies wearing dresses with oversized ties on at the same time were also super incredibly scary, as you would do.
As you do.
Also
as was the fashion.
It was very much the fashion at the time. I have to give props to Dahlia for that one.
Yeah.
So Harry...
Yeah, I guess we'll go over the characters. So Sybil she's kind of like another soul lost in this town with you. And it's great as a character. She's like, a police officer, and she is definitely invested because she's trying to solve these issues as well.
Right.
And so she's like another compatriot lost in the sea here, and she helps every now and again. She doesn't give you a lot of help or tips, but it's nice to have their interaction in there because you play so much of the game in this dreary loneliness.
You are super lonely. There's kind of a bit of Resident Evil to it in that you spend the majority of your time alone. But as we're in Resident Evil, the person that goes with you, Rebecca if you're playing as Chris, or Barry if you're playing as Jill, they show up at points, but they always have like a specific use, or they're helpful in ways that ground you in the reality of the situation.
Yeah, it feels it's a little game.
Yeah,
a little game stuff.
So when you meet up with Sybil or any of the other characters, there's always this uncertainty that like Harry in his way, much like the player, is like, is what I'm actually seeing is this actually happening?
Yeah, and that was the part that I always liked about it, because like with Resident Evil, you knew there was a zombie in this room and I could shoot a guy, he would go down, or I run to a character and this is the bad guy. Silent Hill, I was like, got murdered by children, wake up in diner, am I in purgatory? Am I having a nightmare? And it gets worse. Yeah. Or rather better, because like midway through the game, you start having a headache and then you wake up in a new location, or the location you're in changes, and then there's different characters there, and it's like, is this in his head? And I love the ambiguity of it, because it made me really like start thinking about a bit more carefully about like, am I in a place? And God, I love this part too. Certain architecture that came kind of thing to you. Like I remember specifically there was a part where you did meet up with Sybil again, and she's like, "What's in there?" He's like, "I don't know." They said there was there was like a church or something. It was like a hidden panel behind a doorway. So she's like, "You check it out."
Oh right, where he goes, he finds the altar. Yes.
Yeah, but you as a player, when you walk into that room, it's like a long, like what?
It's a really long hallway down. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's creepy. You're like, what is the purpose of this in the building? And then you get to the room, solve puzzle, and then disappear. And then Sybil's like, "Hey, what happened?" And she peeks in and goes into the room, and it's literally just that room without the hallway, without the other creepy stuff in it. And you're like, at what point did Harry enter into Nightmare Town?
Right, exactly. And that's one of the major things about Silent Hill is that while you're in Silent Hill, and the question of whether or not Harry's in purgatory is actually a very salient one, because again of the fact that there's nobody else in this town. It's a fully fleshed out town, but it's like a ghost town. Whoa. Doors you can't get into,
roads that are just
like
into nothing.
There's chasms, like canyons in these roads. Yeah. But there's also about halfway through the game, maybe a little more than halfway through the game, after you go through the hospital, you can find yourself across the street from the police department. And if you can get in there, you actually get the sense that the town might actually still be populated with people. You're just on a level of existence that like
a parallel dimension or something.
Exactly, because the reason Sybil is there, as you kind of alluded to earlier, is that she's there to solve this the crimes going on about there's
was there a murder?
A drug.
Oh yeah,
the drugs that are being used. And so, she gets there with the idea that there should be people here. And it's very possible, some people have theorized that, yes, Silent Hill is just a town. And there's people still living there.
And to me, this is something, again, like having the being able to look back on this, right? And again, this is another series I enjoy. I've played, like Silent Hill 1, 2, 3, The Room, which is not actually a Silent Hill game, but kind of is.
Well, it was still made by Team Silent, so it gets the Silent Hill. It was the last one that they did.
There's some story in there, and then there's like Homecoming, and then another one after that.
Downpour.
Mm-hmm. So they have like it's a pretty long storied kind of franchise.
Yep.
But it makes me wonder some days looking back, I'm like, did they know what they were doing, or were they just slapping things in there? Because I got a little bit of like a. Now this is funny because like from the series, you're always going to hear about Silent Hill 2, and I feel like that
with good reason, I might add.
Like Silent Hill 1 was a great game to play, but it had a lot of barriers in the way of that enjoyment. Whereas Silent Hill 2, I really feel like they upped it and they refined the formula so much more. And they gave it so much more like psychological hooks and stuff. So I feel like 1 was almost like a test bed for this kind of thing, for this idea, and then 2 really like crystallized what Silent Hill was about.
To me, I would take that a step further. I would say Silent Hill 1 it's like Star Wars: A New Hope, in that it was
set up this
it set it out. Star Wars wasn't the first sci-fi movie, but it was definitely a movie that got like everybody's attention. And then Silent Hill 2 is The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Like Silent Hill 2 to me is as close to a perfect game as you're going to find, particularly in the genre. And it came out in the early 2000s on PlayStation 2.
Oh, it's a PS2 game.
It's a PS2 game,
that's the crazy thing too. So another comment on Silent Hill 1, PS1, right? And terrible back textures, terrible like figures, terrible controls, and terrible backgrounds. But like the thing is like so I love this is like technically the fog that's in that game is actually it's a double feature in that it's cool, but also it keeps the draw distance down because at the time the PlayStation 1 was pretty. It wasn't powerful enough to render the stuff they wanted, so they put in this close like fog so that it could allow the game time to render the rest of the map. And to me, like that's just a stroke of genius, especially for the genre, because it really gives you that whole like scary like what's behind this, what's just ahead of me,
right?
And then the fact that they would lean into it and throw like weird stuff like chasm or chain link fences of doom.
Yep. Well, and not only that, but even at like the nighttime stuff, like a lot of things are dimly lit, and you do get a flashlight, which does kind of open up the area, which you can actually turn on and off in the game too, which I thought was as a mechanic, which I thought was really smart.
Oh yeah, because like so the creatures that you find here, certain ones react to sound, certain ones react to light. So I think when you get to the nurse area, like nurses and doctors react to light.
Yes.
But most things like the hounds and the skin birds would chase you down with sound. And so speaking of sound, you can tell us about the mechanic with the radio.
Oh man, the radio. Oh goodness.
Iconic.
So very early in the game, immediately after you wake up from death by alleyway children, you meet Sybil Bennett in a diner. You wake up, it's very disorienting. We're all like, what just happened? Yeah. And
completely not covered in knife wounds.
Totally, not bleeding to death, clothes aren't torn, nothing. Basically, it looked like Harry just fell asleep in one of the booths.
And had a nightmare.
It's a tiny little nightmare of death by demon children. Yeah. And Sybil, the police officer, has some questions for you.
A little bit of exposition.
Bit of exposition, kind of setting the fact that, hey, this town is really weird. It's really dangerous. There's nobody here. We'll get to this at a later point, but she gives Harry a gun and she tells him what to do with it.
Hey, I'm a cop. Here's a gun. Have fun.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder. So, did you have 2 guns, Sybil?
She was double fisting.
She was because she had a gun later. So clearly she was a gunslinger.
She probably had one in each hand. You know
probably she was guns akimbo. That's what she was. She must have saw Lethal Weapon just a few too many times.
Jump through the air, shoot both guns.
Absolutely.
I buy that.
But then after that, she leaves. And Harry, as he's kind of collecting himself, he kind of goes around. And as he's about to leave the diner, you hear this sound, like this weird white
Radio
black
static.
noise sound from like
Radio static.
very
kind of.
radio static.
Very specific, like weird noise.
Yeah, and you you go over and Harry comments that's like he's radio. What's happening with the radio?
Oh my god! Literally what he says.
It's something akin to that. And he picks it. It's this red radio.
I believe it.
It doesn't work, but it emits these sounds. And almost immediately afterwards, a skin bat blows in. It was skin bat, skin bird, whatever. It blows in through the window, and you can either fight it or you can run. I mean, you could do either or.
Save the ammo.
But don't fight it.
Yeah, and so that brings up again. We talked earlier about how they really integrated sound in the game, and this was another nice stroke. Was creatures would have a specific white noise associated with them, and then depending on the radius, depending on how you rotated, because if you had some good old surround sound, you could tell where they were before you saw them.
Again, the sound mixing on this thing was brilliant. Yeah.
And so I thought that was like a really, like, again, one of the strong points they had was that the sound played a role, and you could tell the monster type, in addition to them making creepy sounds. And I think, I don't know if this, I'm not sure if this is it for sure, but you can turn the radio on and off.
Yes, you can.
And dogs, I think, could hear the radio.
I believe that's true. The dogs would react to the radio as it made sounds.
Yeah, and then the nurses and doctors would react to light. So it was really great that you could kind of have these things you could toggle off and on, and it was great because it was scary. You needed them because there was no map. There was no like indicator. Most of the time when you saw a dog, it was leaping at you, and if you weren't running already, you were getting hit. You were getting like jumped on by them.
Oh yeah. Speaking of running, though, so one of the things you mentioned, the controls. Strangely enough, we've got categories. If you've listened to the first episode of OMG, we have categories that we're going to break down for each game that we review, and for this game particularly. In our last episode, we had a category where the tank controls, I felt they were the worst part about that game. Strangely enough, in this game,
not so bad, huh?
Not so bad. I think some of the thing is that Harry the camera helps. Yeah. Harry's also a hell of a lot more responsive than either Chris or Jill or Rebecca are. And weirdly enough, Harry's movement is momentum based. Really? So you actually build up a little bit of speed as you move, and when you let go of the controls, you don't immediately stop dead in your tracks.
A little bit of carry.
You still have a little bit of that inertia kind of going. Like so you actually have to be very careful. So Harry can feel a little slippery at times, but for the most part, the controls feel much more fluid.
Interestingly enough, too, because it wasn't set in just a lot of like tight areas, you had a lot more opportunity to just hold on the up button and run in a straight direction. So you didn't have to weave near as much, and you began, because the camera was following you, usually close behind, you didn't have to reorient your mind to what the map looked like or to what your situation looked like. So unless you were actually in an interior, I feel like that probably helped out the feel of the controls.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is that unlike Chris or any of the other STARS members, Harry is just a novelist. He's a writer. He's not a fighter. And this is also really apparent in the fact that, like, when he has a gun, if you're trying to shoot at anything more than like 5-6 feet away, your accuracy drops to like 0.
Hey, could you aim up or down with that game? Or
no, you could only there was a bit of an auto aim where you would turn to face them, but like the cone basically covered from like top to bottom.
Yeah, and it was a short distance too. Like you were saying, like once you get a few feet out, you're just
the accuracy is like you are.
And that was kind of a pain because the dogs were on the ground and they're jumping at you, and then the birds, the skin birds, were in the air, so you almost wanted to aim up or almost wanted to be able to aim up or down.
Right.
But you didn't have that kind of capability.
No, and again, I think thematically it plays because again, Harry's just a guy. Like he doesn't have any weapons training.
Oh, but he's a father.
He is the father's determination and willpower to find his daughter is going to be the thing that gets him through the horror.
It's interesting. Like, I feel like he gets a little bit of a superpower in that way because it's like, I don't know about you, but I didn't really know how to operate a gun, and if someone were to have just handed me one back in the time frame, I would have known how to reload it. I knew about safeties from like movies. weeks. But it wasn't so much later that I actually learned how to operate a handgun, and I appreciated and thought it was funnier whenever, I appreciate people being able to shoot really well. And I also thought it was funny that if you just hand it to a complete neophyte of handgun weapons, that they would have any idea how to do it. It's like, no, you'd have to have at least a small amount of training. And even then, like, when do I work the slide? And is the safety on? And does this gun have a safety?
I saw this in a movie. I'm going to pull back the slide and start bang, bang it. Yeah, no, it's...
To be fair, that way, it's good to learn in that fashion. Like, because I learned shooting at literally, like, bottles and jars. Like,
same here, yeah.
But, like, when you hand someone, like, a firearm, in the game, it's taken for granted that you know how to operate it. And they didn't start integrating that. So they didn't start integrating the difficulty of actually aiming into games until much later on. But it didn't feel too far out there that Harry was a kind of a bad shot.
Yeah.
Although, if you keep it generally in the area, and they were close enough, he was pretty bang on. So I think that is interesting. It's like, concerned father powers makes him, like, able to zero in shots.
Yeah, I think probably the most adorable thing about Harry is just the fact that
his clomping shoes whenever he runs.
Clomping shoes. We're kind of like led to believe that Harry's not sure if anything's going on, but the one thing that he knows for certain, he's got to find his daughter.
He was dedicated.
She's out there. Like if I had wrecked my car and I was looking for my daughter, if I couldn't find her within maybe like a quarter-mile radius,
done.
Like, I would be calling the cops. No. Harry is literally running all over from like one end of the town to the next.
He does get the cops, but also he's in Nightmare Town.
Well, and he does briefly see
no phones work. This is before cell phones.
Yeah, I think it was said that the game takes place in either the early or the late 80s. There's some debate about what year it actually takes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it came out at the time, but I don't. It came out in 99, but I don't think it actually took place in the year that it came out.
Yeah. I don't remember seeing any newspaper clippings or anything in the game to indicate it, but
I don't either. But
I buy the whole thing because, again, like if it was done modern day, it was just cell phone reception gone. But there they still had telephones.
Well, whenever we decide to ever really go with shattered memories, that's a conversation we can have.
Don't get me started. I loved a lot of the premise. Again, it's the Silent Hill thing. It's like the highs were amazing. The lows made you want to stop playing. I couldn't play it, but that's another episode.
Dr. Kaufman. The Shattered Memories version of Dr. Kaufman. I'm just gonna that's my critique of Shattered Memories.
Well, so to bring the our listeners in, Dr. Kaufman was one of the characters in Silent Hill 1, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He was I believe he was making the drug, or he was instrumental in creating it?
He was instrumental in creating it. So the entire drug subplot is actually connected to the larger plot that's actually happening here.
Right.
Silent Hill, Harry goes through both what we call light and like nightmare or other versions of Silent Hill, which are the rusted bodies everywhere. There's gore. It's really very darkness and whatnot. Like, imagine like the Saw movies or the Hostel movies, like those kind of like torture porn style settings.
Which I could even say that they probably saw this and were like, that's a good idea for a scary show.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
As it turns out, there is actually a curse being put on the town that is being orchestrated by this cult. This cult of... was it cult of Flauros? Samael? What?
I think the Flauros was the item.
Oh, that's right.
Dolly
the cult of Samael, yes. Dahlia Gillespie, one of the characters, she is masterminding this whole process to rebirth their god that they worship through her daughter, Alessa.
And you need this drug to help make it happen.
This drug to help make it happen.
And
which,
of course, you got to burn the sacred symbols.
Got to burn the symbols. Oh my goodness!
So there was definitely like hot zones, right? Of like where the I suppose interdimensional like rifts were weakening. So yes, this is great. Let me talk about this for a second. The way you traveled to the other world was kind of subtle. Like you would round a corner and suddenly it'd be a little bit darker. Then you would open a room and that room would just you'd assume that room was just darker, and then you go out of it again, and you didn't realize that the whole place was suddenly just dark. So it was so gradual that it almost takes you a minute to realize that you're like, man, this is a scary town already. And that will happen. And then the next part is like in certain parts of the game, you'll unlock a puzzle, or you'll use a puzzle to unlock a door, rather, and you'd crawl into the door. And it would. I remember this one specifically in the school. You went into what looked like a furnace, and then as you walked through it, you'd come out the other end.
Oh, it was the boiler room.
Yeah, you would go through the boiler and it'd come back out kind of exactly the way you came in. So it was like a mirror version, which I thought was really neat. At first, I thought it was like a weird, glitch in the game, but then the cameras were different. So when you would come out the other end, it was the same layout, but Nightmare World.
Yeah, and everything was just slightly different, and it's
and creepified.
And the funny thing is that the shifts would get faster every time. So like,
whoa, and sound design, you'd hear the sirens.
The sirens were always like the indication, like, hey everybody, the switch is happening,
or bad things were getting ready to happen.
Exactly. So bad things are going to happen, or you're going to go to the dark world, or you're going to come back to the light world.
Right. It was kind of a transition sound.
It was very much a transitional
sound. It was
sound.
so chilling. Every time you heard it, you knew something was happening, but you wouldn't even know.
I can't even hear sirens today.
Oh, I know.
Without thinking,
it's a little chill.
Oh, it's.
And this is the part that I really liked, is that like usually when that transition would happen, you'd defeat a boss or you'd solve a puzzle, you'd have a cutscene, and then you'd suddenly be in the regular world. So it was funny to me to have that relief to go from, oh, thank God I'm not in the dark, horrible world. I'm just in the regular, horrible world full of skin monsters. And like that became the new regular. So you're like, oh, I'm just being chased by skin bats and skin dogs. Whew. No longer being chased by, creepy nurses and like
shadow children with knives.
Shadow children. Oh yes, the shadow children with knives. So this is fancy. A little tidbit for you. The children with the knives were actually the only released in the American version because they didn't approve it in European and the Japanese versions because they didn't like the idea. It didn't get past the censors that you were killing things that looked too much like children, because it was kind of a kill or be killed situation. So you're gonna have to step on, kick, or shoot a child.
Yeah, well,
childlike. Creature.
That's the other thing too. Is that when you would shoot an enemy, you could down an enemy but not kill it.
Oh yeah.
And then you would have to go up, and Harry would actually kick it.
You didn't have to kill it every time. Like if you hit with enough bullets, it would go down, and then so you could tell because the sound would go out, right? So the radio was in there. You'd hear like that kind of hiss, and you go, "Still alive." So you'd walk over to a body and kick it. It was again a great like tool to use that would let you know that, oh, by the way, this enemy is still active and might get back up.
Right.
But
right.
Once they get up the first time, you don't mess around.
No.
Over everybody and make sure that
like there's
give them a little stamp.
The funny thing is that whereas in Resident Evil, dodging the zombies was just as much of a skill as knowing when to pick your battles and whatnot, and you were never really given enough to fight everybody.
You could stretch it.
You could stretch. In Silent Hill, they actually give you a series of melee weapons that do allow you to engage in every enemy that you meet. You don't have to shoot them.
Oh, man.
I will say, though, the fire axe, which I may be talking about later, is especially handy in, like, just beating the ever-living shit out of the monsters. And it's like, you can actually kill everything or nothing.
Yeah, you can.
Like you don't even have to kill the final boss.
Really?
Yes, there is.
I didn't know about that.
We can. I'll get into that a little bit later. But Silent Hill presents you with an option of there are only a certain number of enemies you have to engage with.
Oh, okay.
So it's really interesting in that regard.
They definitely. And so this is kind of like where the survival horror genre kind of like shows its thing, because you're definitely managing items, but not as bad, right? Because you don't have a
limited inventory.
Not at all. Like it was infinite. Like
you could pick up anything.
Everything. You got your knife. You got your pipe. I think you got your axe.
You got your pipe. You got your fire axe. You can get a hatchet,
sniper rifle, or
hunting rifle. Yeah.
And then of course like the keys and stuff, which would conveniently delete themselves from you. So they did away with that, but you definitely would get a limited sort of. I say limited in that they give you a lot, but you just have to know to look for them. You have to scrounge to find the health potions or little strips of energy drinks.
Yeah, little energy drinks. They almost look like ginseng drinks.
Yeah. And so they gave you a pretty robust amount if you were a scrounger and you went into every section. If you didn't, you would likely find enough, but I don't know if you would be able to do the whole game. But then, if you're trying to avoid combat, then it wouldn't be as important.
Right. But yeah, definitely, it did reward you for searching, and that was one of the things that I think that was genius that you talked about is searching the town.
Yeah.
So
and I enjoyed doing like, okay, so there's a fine line. Like, I liked being rewarded for finding extra goodies. I completely hated having to backtrack to find that one widget, that plate of cat.
Okay, hey, hang on. We will talk about that later. We will absolutely hit that. So, let's get into the categories. So, first up, what is our most replayable moments or favorite moments? Here are the nominees. First one, exploring Silent Hill. I love the fact, and you mentioned it earlier, you are just dumped into a town.
Scary town.
USA. It's foggy. Scary Town, USA, population U. You don't really know where to go. You see a little silhouette of your daughter, who you think is your daughter, and she's kind of running away, and you follow her. But for all intents and purposes, when you are in the town of Silent Hill proper, when you are not inside of a building, you have so much to explore. There are literal miles of street that you could run down.
It was like, I mean, this is gonna be a stretch, but it's like Mountains of Madness, right? Cthulhu like reference. I imagine you're being put at the Mountains of Madness, the foot of it, and you go explore, and you have this whole scary town to get lost in. That felt good. You're like, I have my creepy adventure set out in front of me.
Yep. The next one is the diner scene at the beginning. When, after Harry wakes up, he's been murdered by children, death in the alleyway. He wakes up, thinks it's a dream, meets Sybil. Just the way that scene kind of sets up the game and kind of really... it's your first plot twist. Like, I was playing the game for 10 minutes and I died. And
it wasn't really like terribly contrived. It literally sets you up for like, this is how the game's going to be.
This is how it's going to be.
Get ready for a mind trip.
And well, the funny thing is that when you play, if you beat the game and then reload, play the save file to play it again, you skip over the entire alleyway death scene. You immediately wake up in the diner.
Oh, neat.
It's such
like a tutorial.
But it's also like a lovely way of referencing the fact that this is where the game really starts. This is where the mind screw really begins to happen. So I think the diner scene at the beginning, kind of laying that out is a great section.
What do you got? What else? You got?
Meeting Dahlia Gillespie for the first time. Dahlia Gillespie is
the like flapper dress and
she's got
red and blue tie.
It's a giant red and blue necktie that she's wearing over this. It's like the most anachronistic, like weirdly put together. It's like what a child would expect, like an adult to wear. She's like, but she's like 60 years old. Yeah. She's got like a headscarf thing. Yeah, she's wearing it, and when you first meet her, you go into a church. It's right. I want to say it's right before you get to the drawbridge, or it's right after. I can't remember.
It's about like first quarter, first eighth.
It's about the first quarter, 20 to 30% of the game.
Yeah.
You meet her in a CGI cutscene, and she's facing away from you. She's at the altar. She turns around. Dramatic turn. She like cricks her neck and she's chewing on something.
Yeah, I noticed that.
And you see like full on this tie. And I remember watching it for the first time. I laughed my ass off.
Yep.
And it's still one of my most favorite moments because
I remember we played this game together.
We did. This was actually one of those.
You just broke up laughing.
My goodness! I remember we're teenagers in high school and we're just sitting in your basement on your TV playing this game, and it was the best. It was the best. Next one is what I call Chainsaw Harry. If you beat the game and you play on no fear mode, you can get a chainsaw. And the best part,
they hint at it too.
They do. They hint at it
because there's a chainsaw and there's a jackhammer.
There's a chainsaw and a jackhammer, and
it's like it's out of gas.
Yeah,
and you're like,
there's no gas. However, you can find gasoline in a second playthrough, and when you get it, Harry can use the chainsaw, and the best thing is when he like lifts it above his head.
Does he yell?
He does. He yells.
Did you have to push a button, or if you hold it and it's on, he just does it after a time?
I think I want to say he does it after a time. I'll have to double check, but
I'm gonna go back and look that up.
It's so great. It's so great, and then the last nominee, please feel free to add more if you'd like.
I got another one for you. But you tell me yours.
Getting the UFO ending.
I never got the UFO ending.
Oh man,
this is like a weird shortcut to the game, and so it's weird because every Silent Hill game, minus a couple exceptions, there would be a funky shortcut joke ending to the game where you could get a UFO to come in and you would get a separate ending. So this game series has a multiple ending. You have a good, bad, bad plus.
Yeah, good plus, bad plus.
Yeah. And
although
then,
it really should be bad minus,
I know,
is
right?
what it is.
But you also would get the UFO ending. So I've never seen any of these, and you're gonna have to tell me like how that goes.
Okay, so you can only get the UFO ending after you've beaten the game.
Yeah.
It's a second playthrough only. You have to get one of the other endings first.
And it shortens the game too.
It does. It shortens it quite significantly, actually.
Yeah.
You have to go around. You have to go to a number of places, and you have to get a few different artifacts that are not there in the first playthrough of the game.
Yeah.
But if you have all of these artifacts, and when you get to the lighthouse, about 2/3 of the way through the game, so kind of right before you get to the little carnival fair amusement park section, and then you go to nowhere at the end. Like you skip all of that, and you get to the top of the lighthouse. Oh, the other thing too is you have to notice these. You have to go to certain places, and you have to see the UFO lights. So if you see all the UFO lights and you have the appropriate items, when you get to the top of the lighthouse at the end, where there's the giant like seal of Samael right where, right at the end for like no weird reason, then aliens come down and abduct Harry. They come down and it goes to like a bunch of still frames, and it almost like silent film-esque.
Right.
And the aliens come out, and Harry's like, "Have you seen my daughter?" Even still asking extraterrestrials. They zap him and abduct him and fly away. That's the end.
Oh,
That's
my
it.
God.
It's so crazy. It's so weirdly done. And the best part is that the UFO ending kind of builds itself up in every game. Every game kind of builds on the UFO ending a little bit. So it's actually really
dude, the one in number 3 I've seen.
The one in number 3 is really funny, particularly with a cameo from the Silent Hill 2 protagonist.
Oh my goodness.
But
so is this all the ones you have?
This is just the ones I have. What do you got? What do you got?
This is a moment in the game that stuck with me the most. It was the most horrifying thing ever. Like in the game, you meet a character, Lisa Garland, I think is her name.
Yep.
She's a nurse, and it's tied in the plot. I guess I won't go into too deeply, but she's a character that was important in the hospital area, and she's like, "Oh, hey, I woke up here. Can you help me?" Because you're meeting other characters in the game, and they're like, "Hey, I'm in this nightmare too," and you're like, "Well, let me help you out." Eventually, she said she lost her memory. She couldn't remember like how she got there. But then she's like, "Oh, I remember I was doing these things related to the plot." And this cutscene kicks on where she's like, "Oh, you got to help me, and we have to get out of here." And she starts bleeding out of her forehead and her eyes and her face. And she's coming at you, and she looks so sad. And Harry's like, "Oh my God." And clearly the correct reaction is to freak out and run away, which he does. But then at the end of the cutscene, this was a good CGI cutscene.
It was really good, actually. Yes.
Really well for the time frame. So she starts bleeding out of her face, and then you run out the door, and you hear her banging on the door, begging for help, and you see Harry like sitting there holding the door shut with his body, and he slides down the door, and all you hear is her sad crying on the other end, and I'm like, this is the saddest thing I've ever seen. If you go back in there, she's gone.
She's gone.
There's an item I think you can pick up.
I believe it's her
pendant or
her
something.
Pendant, yeah.
And to me, I'm like, no. And that is the thing that stuck with me like the most of that game, because it's like, like there's a couple of different levels there, because like you're in a scary world and someone starts melting in front of you, and you're like, is this contagious or is this person turning into a monster? So of course you're going to run away, and the fact that you kind of do, and you weren't there for her during her end, because it feels like it's her end. She shows up again later.
She does. She shows up. She shows up in the good endings.
Good endings. Yeah. So she helps you out later on. But like, oh man, that stuck with me. I was shaken up when I saw it. I was like, oh man.
That's actually really. I'm glad you brought that up, because like that too for me was definitely a very memorable cutscene, because like Lisa's one of the very few people that you actually interact with, other than maybe Sybil that like
Kaufman,
actually.
But she was clearly like not a bad character.
No, she wasn't a bad character. So Lisa Garland was she's a nurse, but she was also unfortunately a drug addict. And
that's right.
She was being manipulated by Kaufman, and
because the drug, right? The drug was addicting.
Yeah, it was very addicting, and so they basically ham-fisted her into or strong-armed her into, watching over this young woman, Alessa, who was going to be used as the vessel for the birth of the god.
And this is part of like the plot.
This is part of the plot. And so poor Lisa was just
there to look after her.
She was just there to be her nurse. And
in true Nightmare Fuel fashion, she's like, this child was like burned.
Burned.
Third degree burns over her entire body. Still alive. Still leaking pus and fluids.
Yeah, and wasn't healing.
Like, and she's like, I need out of this because it's nightmare. And
unfortunately, the good Dr. Kaufman put an end to that real quick.
Does he kill her?
Yeah, he totally kills her.
I didn't know that.
Well, that's one of the things. It's very implied. It's funny because when you see you can tell because
so she's like a ghost haunting that town.
She's essentially trapped in the nightmare version of Silent Hill. Everything is scary.
So like for Harry, it's like murdered by children with knives, and then for Lisa, like death by drug withdrawals.
Well, no, I mean Kaufman just kills her.
Okay.
I want to say he strangles her.
Oh god.
But I can't remember exactly. But he definitely kills her.
Yeah.
But yeah, that moment where she remembers, like, I remember, and
what
then
happened?
and because it starts when she's talking. It's in a cutscene that utilizes the character models.
Yeah.
Like a lot of cutscenes that they tend to be voiced.
Good
but then
old emoting with like a 10-pixel eye and like face.
Oh gosh, the
mouths didn't open. I don't.
The Resident Evil. I'm gonna put my like fully extended hand fingers out to like make gestures and like it's so great. But then it immediately shifts to that CGI cutscene.
High quality CGI for the time, high quality,
and it's got the saddest music as like Lisa starts tumbling.
It builds. I was like, get me out of here.
Oh, it was so bad. And then like I agree, feeling Harry's despair at like he runs away, he closes the door.
And then if you go back, you don't have to, but if you do go back, I was like, no, Harry, why weren't you there?
Right. You kind of feel really bad. I have to say that's a very, very memorable moment. Oh man, that's tough.
I hope I didn't. Come on, man.
No, I mean,
guns.
I'm sticking to my guns. I honestly
sure.
I honestly think that for me, Chainsaw Harry is like, that is what I played the game to get. You mentioned in the Resident Evil, in the last episode, about how, playing a game really well can reward you, or just playing it can reward you with the ability to play the game in a whole new way. Maybe take out a little vengeance on all the bad stuff, but just having the chainsaw, even though it's kind of unwieldy to use, but it's so fun.
As with everything in that game.
As with everything. I'm gonna go with Chainsaw Harry is my most replayable moment.
Gotcha.
The UFO ending, though, I would say is a close second.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and take a look at those.
Yeah.
All right.
So the flip side of that coin. Next category. Don't make me do this.
Oh, I love. That's such a perfect category because. I wanted to do a little bit of art for us for the episode, and I popped in a 4-hour-ish video of someone playing it, and I'm like, and it gave me back all the memories I repressed of. It was a slog, man. It was a slog.
It's
like I distinctly remember going into. I needed a guide. I definitely needed a guide, and even with the guide, I was like, I don't want to go back because there's a lot of junk I missed in there. So. The elementary school, it just dragged forever, and then the backgrounds didn't change a lot. The puzzle, there was a couple of good creepy puzzles, but there was definitely like a key. Like you would have to walk into a door, turn it 100% around, and then go off in a corner. And it's like in Resident Evil, each room was kind of small enough for you to kind of like look around and go, okay, let me just walk around the corners of the map and hit the X button and everything, right?
Yeah.
So you could very easily brute force it and like hit every inch of the room and be like, okay, I definitely didn't find anything here. In this game, not only was it super creepy, but you just didn't want to be in any of those maps, and that was it's part of the game. It's part of the feel is like I don't want to be here, but I also have to literally drag my face across every square pixel. To find these keys. I didn't find the rubber ball the first time through, so I had to go back to a bunch of monsters.
Oh my goodness.
I had to go back to a bunch of monsters I had bypassed, and it's just like, don't make me go back and do this pixel hunting. Yeah. Essentially for keys that they're not going to show you anything for. And they didn't have anything in the map that would highlight and say, oh, by the way, there's an item in this thing. So the map would update. As you'd find a map, it would give you the map of the area. But if you didn't find the map, then you were boned.
You were totally boned.
And then thing number, because it would open up and say, I don't have a map for this area.
Right. Whereas with like Resident Evil, you could at least
it would fill in.
It would fill in a map-like area, but
the closest thing that this had was if you bumped into a door, like say, like again, the hospital, for example, or elementary school, you could just walk across you could run up to the door and hit the X button and be like, can I go in here? And it would jangle and say, oh, it's inaccessible. And then it would put an X or a thing on the wall. That way you knew you couldn't go. Yeah, it would cross it out. So that was nice. It would fill in, but man, they didn't make it easy at all. And literally quit. Not rage quit, but like I was stumped and I was like, I want to play a game that gives me a feeling I'm making some progress. And I want to see the story, but this game actively doesn't want me to play it.
Yeah, so you the pixel hunting again, just like it's slogging through everything. See, so the nominees I had for this particular category kind of touch on what you just talked about. The school, the hospital, the theme park.
I liked that.
The theme
because
park,
it was creepy.
It was creepy, but there was no light version of it.
Right.
So it's just like it's all dark. I hated that one. The sewer, an actual literal sewer level. Fighting Sybil on the carousel. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to shoot her.
Okay. So for me, that gets a pass because you didn't want to, but it was so good that the game made you like experience that like didn't want to feeling.
Because there is a way that you don't have to, but to figure that out, you normally have to play it unless you happen to have some kind of weird foresight.
Again, so for me, this wasn't that big of a deal because my first playthrough, once I learned that I had to scour every freaking item, I just scoured and I was like, "What's this liquid do? What's this do?" I think I might have
Aglaophotis.
Yeah. You had to find a thing, and then you had to use it at the right time, which that's kind of a pain because, like, do you know when to use this item? So that I can put in the "Don't make me do this," but you can do it right and you can save Sybil, and so I think I managed to use it at the right point. And to me, that wasn't that bad of a problem, right? But I do understand the whole. Like, I don't want to fight. I don't want to shoot.
No,
I don't want to attack a character that I have come to rely on as. So that was a good kind of twisty thing.
Yeah, it was a good kind of twist. My first playthrough of Silent Hill, I unfortunately had to solve that problem with bullets, and unfortunately, Sybil could not stand up to bullets. She died. But I did get you're supposed to, I believe.
You have to knock her down.
You have to knock her down. Then you use the vial of you scoop up some of the Aglaophotis to get the juice, the red juice out of her. But I did find the other vial in Kaufman's motorcycle, so he did come at the end.
There's a bit of a hint. There's a hint of it.
There's a hint for that one, yes.
And I believe I put two and two together. I don't know. Luckily, because again, I was like a puzzle game, so I was like, oh well, I'm not supposed to kill like.
Well. And the other thing about these games like Resident Evil, all these survival horrors, that a lot of the game is told through files, and you find like these documents.
A lot of reading.
A lot of reading. It's very much like a text adventure.
It's hard too because if you're in it for the action, you know that stuff can get tedious. And if you're in it for the adventure, again, you're like, well, I want to do the adventure, not read about it.
That's true.
Like, I liked getting lost in the lore, so I definitely would spend time and read every file, and it helped that the game pause whenever you had your menu up.
That's very true. That it was generous in that regard. And then my last nominee for the "Don't Make Me Do This" is probably the most infamous puzzle. It's the piano puzzle in the elementary school. I remember
that was like the little pooplet on top of the turd.
That was
turd sundae.
Yeah, that was basically it. That's the little flex right at the top. That I
mean, as an idea, it was good, but it was vague.
It was vague enough because
it gave you a poem, right? And then the poem would talk about. It was essentially talking about the keys on the board you had to hit, but you didn't know, like, because it talked about birds flying higher, birds flying lower, and it was either a blackbird or a white bird of some kind, and you were like, well, which one's the high one? And if you're not a musician, you wouldn't know that some notes are higher or lower.
You wouldn't know if it was the left or right side.
Exactly right.
And the other thing too is that everybody and their mother thought you had to play the non-broken keys, but the problem is
the broken keys are
the ones you're supposed to find.
Yeah,
I remember being stuck on that puzzle for literal hours trying to figure it out.
I don't think I didn't struggle on that one. It's weird. Like, I'm kind of a dummy when it comes to video games. Like, I don't look into subtext. I don't dig too hard into like theme kind of stuff. And occasionally I'll put two and two together. So I loved talking with you after we'd play a game separately, where I would go, oh, did you do that? And you're like, what are you talking about? Like, he even told me, like, what you replayed Resident Evil 1, and you were like, oh, you're supposed to push the statue over that thing so you can get whipped.
Oh my goodness, that melted my brain. I have been playing this game for 20 years, and I never knew in the guardhouse you could push the statue over the hole. And I remember you saying, well, what did you do? And I'm like, I just take the damage.
Ran right
and
by.
you're like, tank the damage?
So again, you play as Chris, you could tank damage.
Oh, yeah.
As Jill, that's a herb I had to redo. So the funny thing is, the first thing I did was I walked forward, and the statue it's literally in the way.
It's literally in the way.
And I just bumped into it. I'm like, well, let's just push it a bit. And once I pushed it far enough, the camera angle changed, and I just happened to be pushing it long enough to go, oh, I get it. And so for me, it clicked. So in this game, there were a couple of things that clicked for me, and pushing the broken keys was like, I don't know why, but that was the setup I ended up doing. Granted, I struggled at it a bit, but I did get it.
Yeah.
I do have another "Don't make me do this."
Okay. Yes. What you got?
It's not quite. Maybe this is like didn't age very well, because I distinctly remember having a lot of what's this called? There's an ammunition for the hunting rifle.
Oh,
and I'm like,
let's save this.
Okay.
We'll say I know what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So you know. All right.
I know what you do. Let's go ahead and save that. So
right,
I'm gonna say that for me, fighting Sybil, that's the thing I didn't want to do. What about you?
Dude, that pixel hunting, man. Like, it turns into a slog.
Yeah, there's and unlike Resident Evil, since it's all textured out, it's not always apparent which one is.
And like, they didn't do very much by way of, like, they would do occasionally, like, there'd be like a blood stain, or sometimes they would highlight it, or it would be on a table, or they would position the camera in a way that would say that you would naturally like go, like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to go. And other times, not even a bit.
Yeah.
So to me, there was like I said, hit or miss. The hits were hitting and the misses were missing. That's my
Oh, okay.
So let's go with let's age the best.
Let's age the best. Now that we've talked about some bad, let's get back to the good. I only have 4 nominees for this particular category. Please, again, feel free.
Sure. As I do.
What's aged the best? The story. I mean, the story is actually really, really good. It's nuanced. It's layered. It's a psychological bent. It's got some interesting characters.
Plot twists.
Some great plot twists.
Yeah.
I think it's an enjoyable ride to get through if you can get through it.
By enjoyable, you mean horrific nightmare. And when you're done, you're like, that was a great.
You're like,
nightmare.
That's great. I am never sleeping again. Harry's devotion, the fact that he is like trying to be super dad the entire way. He loves his daughter, even though she's not, his blood. He treats her like
you gotta appreciate the dad.
I mean, particularly now that there's so many deadbeat dads nowadays. Harry is the shining beacon that all dads should aspire to. You should,
least minimally.
I mean, at least look.
You should be willing to chase your spawn or nominated spawn
or spawn adjacent.
Through a nightmare town.
Through a nightmare town. If you're not willing to do that, you're not a good dad. I think the shifting between worlds, between light and dark versions. I know light and dark worlds kind of get a bad rap, but in this particular instance, they're different enough that they feel like wholly different experiences, and they do different things to you while you're playing.
I think they did an organic transition, and half the time I didn't even realize I was like neck deep in Dark World until I came out of it, or until I was like, wondering why I'm being accosted by like 10 nurses with knives. I was like, why is there so many here?
Yeah.
And then once I cleared the area, I was like, oh, breath of relief. I'm only being chased by skin animals.
Yeah, skin animals. And I also put outtakes on here as a nominee because if you get one of the good endings, then you'll see a vignette of like CGI scenes where they laugh, or they have like a moment where they're like, oh, this is all just a movie, and it's kind of a cool thing. The idea of kind of poking fun at
I like that
game.
Self-awareness.
Yeah, there's a level of self-awareness, and I think it's also very refreshing too at the end of a game that clearly tried to scare the bejesus out of you. Mm-hmm. It was kind of a good thing to have. What do you think? What do you want to add here?
Well, I'd like to add the blend of the audio track into the gameplay.
Yes, the sound design.
That's a step up. Even today, I find modern games struggle to reach that kind of integration. Some do, but none do it. I feel like if you were to turn off the sound on Silent Hill, you would miss out on a good third of the game.
You know what? I agree. Silent Hill is definitely a holistic experience
Yeah.
where every single piece was thought out. Like you were saying earlier about the flashlight and the radio, like every piece was designed to have its
the music
place.
pushing the tension.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like, so for the sound design specifically, there's like I said, the clomping feet, the gunfire, the growls and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to like the music cues, when a moment of tension kicks in, when you have a cut scene and like the song like kicks in, like I really feel like the music really elevates this game, and to me like that's what sets this apart, and that's, I feel like, carries through the entire series going forward. Well, maybe not all of it, most of it, and to me like that's one of the things that I think like really stands out.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm a fan of the environment that the sound creates and the way that it supplements the material that you're exploring as you're going through the game. So yeah, I would say that the sound is definitely up there for me. So what do you think? What do you think has aged the best out of all this?
Yeah, I think sound's what, in my opinion, carries forward. The shifting between worlds is kind of neat, but it's that I would say ages the best. Like, I feel like they've done better jobs with refining it. The outtakes, I don't know if that's aged at all, because do they keep that consistently?
No, it was kind of just like a one-off thing that I thought was really good.
The story, while interesting, is a little convoluted. So I feel like the thing that I felt like resonated the most with me was the sound and was the music, really.
Yeah,
so
I agree. I think the sound design more so than the music, because again, I think this is a game that needs to be experienced on like a holistic level. Yeah, and so every piece kind of makes it better. So I definitely think this is a game that's more than the sum of its parts.
All right, then. Well, while we're on the subject, what do you think aged the worst?
Oh, man. Okay, so the nominees for this category are the voice acting, as many early or even late era PlayStation 1 games just had bad voice acting.
It didn't feel campy enough, in my opinion, either. But
okay.
I'll let it.
I mean, not everything is on the Metal Gear Solid level, which may be a game we might wind up doing.
Oh, yeah, we'll have to.
I think Dahlia's Plan also as a nominee was it didn't age well, because you had to birth the god Samael through a person like that.
Through
just
your psychic baby.
Yeah, psychic. It's, oh man. I don't think Dr. Kaufman's character aged very well, because he is like...
Didn't he die? So maybe he didn't age very well at all.
Well, it depends on if you get the good or bad ending. If you get the bad ending, he totally gets away scot-free. But the fact that he was essentially like a drug dealer, like he was in a hospital and he used the resources to turn the white dahlia flower into this highly addictive like substance that,
Now, was the drug integral to their...
Oh, it was absolutely integral.
Like, it was required to help do the Elder Gods.
It was.
Bidding.
Well, because it was used on Alessa to basically build her connection and her power to make
powers.
Yeah, to make it easier for her to be manipulated.
And did we mention that, by the way? Like, the kind of reveal about the whole Nightmare Town scenario is that, like, the daughter Alessa, it's all her. You're living her nightmare.
Yes, she's the one who's
like
actually
plot twist.
That is a plot twist. It's and speaking of that, another nomination is Alessa and Cheryl's connection, which I thought was really it really tenuous, because so Alessa is Dahlia's daughter.
Yeah,
and she, in her barely living form, her
super burned
fried form, she had her soul split from her body, and that soul became the baby Cheryl. The child that you found. The child you found.
And you found while Harry and his wife were out in Silent Hill. This is where they find the child.
Mm-hmm, yep.
And instead of going to the police saying, "Hey, anyone lose a baby?"
Yeah. Instead, they just take the baby. I think the connection was it doesn't really age well for me. It was really wacky. Yeah. But yes, Silent Hill, the dark version of Silent Hill, is Alessa basically creating this nightmare world as a result of her soul being ripped from her body as a means to protect herself. And the actual creatures that are populating Silent Hill are actually based off of her nightmares.
Yeah, straight out, like the I think they said because she only knows like a hospital, right? Which is why you saw wheelchairs, which is why you saw like hospital gurneys, why you saw nurses and doctors like over the course of it. Granted, you were in a hospital at some point, but like this is all kind of from her perspective, and even the bosses, because you would find children's books I think, that would tell you like little fairy tale stories, and then you would fight those particular creatures.
Another thing that I think aged the worst is writers as survival horror protagonists.
What, you didn't like Alone in the Dark?
I mean,
come on,
it's oh man. I think there's a place for it. Stephen King does this quite a bit with his
perhaps overdone. Then
I would say really overdone. A little tidbit: the street names of Silent Hill.
I appreciate that.
They are all based off of horror and science fiction writers.
I like that
Bachman, who is Stephen King's alter ego.
Pen
name.
Pen
His
name.
he originally started writing under the Bachman name. Elroy, Bradbury, Finney, Matheson, Levine. All of those horror science fiction writers. In fact, even the elementary school was named after John Wyndham, who is the author of the novel The Midwich Cuckoos. So another psychological
I like that.
drama there.
I like it that they show a little bit of the roots of where they got their ideas.
Yeah,
that's pretty neat. I appreciate that.
I still think Harry Mason. I mean, he's a good guy. Just like I don't want to play a writer when I'm playing a science like a survival horror game. It doesn't.
But it feels good though to me. Like. It makes more sense that it's an everyman or someone who does a mundane job, not special forces character. So to me, I appreciate that. But again, they carry this over in the series, right? Like what was the sequel?
So James Sunderland was a clerk.
Yeah,
he was just a store clerk.
And then like number 3 was some.
Let's not get into
spoilers, but
it was a little girl, high school girl.
And then we had 4 was
oh my goodness, I just had his
veteran?
name. No. That was in Homecoming.
Was
but
returning veteran.
There's a thing with that. Yeah, he was an army vet. And the 4th one, you're just a dude.
You're talking about The Room.
The Room, yeah. 4th one, The Room. You're just a dude.
Some guy. Like it never really got into his job.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
We gotta talk about The Room at some point.
Honestly, I am down. Whenever you want to do The Room, we can do The Room.
Because not to be confused with the film. This is Silent Hill: The Room, which was
you're tearing me apart, Lisa.
So appropriate because Lisa Garland,
exactly. It comes full circle.
But like, just a little taste is like it wasn't technically supposed to be a Silent Hill game and plays dramatically different. But oh my goodness, does that game bring the scary?
Oh, it
brings the scary.
I agree. It does bring the scary. You can tell they learned
from it. But like again, this game being the progenitor, I feel like the DNA is there for sure.
It absolutely is there. So,
sorry.
Also, what aged the worst? You were going to bring up something about
the rifle.
Yes, the rifle.
So this almost ties back into like poor like item placement or I don't know, like heuristics where you want the affordance maybe even where you want the player to find things kind of naturally seeming but not where they actually can potentially miss this. And so I would miss keys and be completely stuck. There was a boss fight you had and you fall down like into a pit and fight some kind of like sandworm.
Yeah, it's
creature.
like because you're going through the ruins of like a shopping mall all the time. Yeah, and
there's literally a rifle in there that I never found, and it's literally just sitting on the wall there, and it's you know as everything was in the game, poorly rendered. And it looked like a lump of sticks, and one was literally a hunting rifle, and I was like, "Where's the hunting rifle at?" And you can't go back because you beat the boss,
and then you're completely gone. You can't go back to it.
You wake up and you actually escape the nightmare world, and there's not a place you can return to. So you know it makes no sense that in the nightmare world there's a rifle there, and in the real world where the rifle would be, it's not there, or rather you don't even get back into that place. I think you just wake up somewhere else.
You do I believe after that you wake up in the I want to say
hospital
that's
again?
where you do go back to the hospital area.
Yeah.
Because you have like an interlude with Lisa again.
Get me out of this hospital.
Oh man, the hospital. Yeah.
And so yeah, that kind of thing with the item placement, like it's weird to put it in there with the boss because say Resident Evil, there was a cutscene, helicopter. And then the camera shows him throw a weapon down. And that's how you know, this is the thing I need to get. They didn't have to bash you over the head with it, but they could have at least put it like on the way to the boss, there was a stand that had the weapon on it, or even in with the boss, there's like a light, like a faint light kind of shining onto it, right? But like it was so just nondescript that I thought it was just a bad texture or a pipe.
Well, and there's even a in Resident Evil 1, as we talked about, there's actually a boss fight against a spider that the way out of the room, you don't technically have to kill the spider. It just makes it a hell of a lot easier.
Right.
There is a door that has a bunch of webbing on it. Now, if you have a flamethrower, you can burn it.
Yeah.
But if you don't have anything, the only other thing that would do it would be a knife. But at that point, you've left your combat knife in the box like hours ago.
No, there's a knife in there.
But they leave a knife for you to make it so that way you can't possibly get stuck there.
Right. And you didn't need the knife to fight the boss, but it was kind of like a puzzle element.
Yeah.
Whereas in here, like if you discover the weapon, it was kind of like the last upgrade of your weapon tree.
Yes, it was. And
it
was
pistol,
the most
shotgun,
powerful. Yes,
like a sniper rifle.
Yes,
and hunting rifle. And I never found it. I was like, man, that boss. I had to use up so many shotgun rounds. I ran out. Used pistols.
Well, and also you talked about you mentioned earlier about the plate of Cad, like the location of some of the like puzzle required items. You have to go in so many weird locations. You have to. You would never expect it, and you're not even sure like. It almost fosters this sense of like any item you can pick up, just pick it up, even if you never use it.
And it helped that the game didn't further frustrate things by limiting your inventory space.
That's true. That's definitely one of the things that I appreciate.
But the real trick was like, did you find all the tools around? So again, this is one of the games that really made you have to like look like every square inch. And out of that whole stack there, yeah, I'm going to keep going with item placement because the voice acting, it doesn't let me down. Excuse me. It doesn't let me down too badly. The plans, I mean, that kind of goes hand in hand with the story.
Yeah,
they definitely didn't age well.
They didn't
Correct.
age
Yeah,
well.
Like, I agree with you on that point, but like for me, like when it comes down to like the gameplay, like that item placement, it was like, ugh. And then even the slogs of doing the elementary school and the hospital, it just felt like you were just.
Yeah, I'm still gonna go with the writers as survival horror protagonists. I mean, there are some games, well, maybe one game that I think did it to an effect where it actually was a mechanic in the game that kind of made thematic sense. And I'm talking about Alan Wake, a game we might talk about eventually. Should we?
That was a great time.
I enjoyed that. That's one of my sneaky favorite games, even though it's like blisteringly ridiculous.
Yeah, for sure. And still, you can have your guilty pleasure. It's
of course, it is an absolute guilty pleasure. Okay.
Well, we're already halfway. So we're already halfway into what would you do different.
Yeah, so
you kind of heard my take on the item placement, right?
Yeah.
If you indulge me a bit longer, then
yeah, absolutely. So what would you do different, Matt? Item placement. What would you do?
Well, so item placement was one of the things, and I told you, like Resident Evil, there wasn't a time when I was like, like where I was like, this needs to be fixed or needs to be addressed. In Silent Hill, though, item placement was a nightmare. I would dial back the amount of like. Of looking around, scrounging around in horrible looking like places. Like they literally felt like there was. I don't remember if there was an explicit sewer level, but there was definitely
there was an explicit sewer level. Yes, on your way connecting from the I want to say Western Silent Hill or East. It was one of the other sides of Silent Hill to get to the theme park side.
It felt like there was 4 sewer levels in this game because I love that the elementary school like changed into the nightmare world. That was cool, but man, was that a struggle to get there. And then the hospital, I was like, can I be done here because you're going down corridors all day? And I mean, sure, I felt like I was lost in a nightmare, but at the same time, it wasn't an enjoyable nightmare.
Yeah,
So and there was so much backtracking required. So I would definitely reduce the way of backtracking. Definitely make it a little bit easier for players to either organically discover the items that are in there, or make it so that you do not require items to do. Like maybe there's a puzzle, and if you don't figure it out, you can just shoot your way down, or you can break your way in. Something like that.
Yeah, I can absolutely respect that.
And then, like so, you said you wanted last episode. You were saying the tank controls were pretty bad for you. And here I don't mind. I feel like it's the way the combat was. I would definitely tweak the combat a bit because the dogs were just always leaping at you, so you had to spend a lot of the game just running. and it's okay if the game discourages fighting by making it an active choice to engage. But like in here, it didn't feel like it was like a skill check, more of a just as a way to discourage your exploration.
Well, that was definitely one of the things because unlike Resident Evil, where in those games the zombies would try to attack you if they were in range, but once you kind of got out of range, like they wouldn't really chase you that much. In Silent Hill,
aggression range.
Those dogs, once they see you and decide to attack you, because they don't always do so, once they decide to attack you, they will not stop.
And they'll chase you across town.
They will chase you across the entirety of that map.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would... this is like a huge thing, because, like, for me, there was, like, a lot of things that I would change, like, in item placement, AI, combat, like, those kind of effects would be done. But, man, the things they got right were just so right that it bounces. It almost tilts the scale to, like, into, like, forgivable zone. Yeah. So that's me, but what would you do?
For me, if I could just talk real quick about the item placement. I agree the item placement was particularly rough in the fact that, like, if you missed something like the hunting rifle, it could potentially make things harder. However, you don't actually have to have you actually don't have to have a weapon to beat the last boss in this game, which is kind of a surprising little Easter egg that I found. But I will say that, like, I enjoy the fact that they gave us Silent Hill to explore. I love the fact that it is a place that you can actually get lost in, and it's something that can reward you for going out of the way and finding that little something extra.
Right. Like there was like a car, I think. Or
There's a car that had a car and I think an RV that had a bunch of stuff in it. Or maybe I'm thinking the second. Ammo. Yeah, it's there's stuff. There's stuff if you found it, like an extra little cache of goodies to help you.
They definitely reward you for going a bit out of your way.
They do, but I do agree in the sense that when you are in an enclosed area, like you're in a building or something, that they could have simplified some of the level design to make it so that you're not having to explore like every Silent Hill 2. I guess one of the things that to me Silent Hill 2 got wrong was that version of the hospital had so many rooms to try to check, to look for stuff. You're just going in, you're going out, you're going in, you're going out, you're going in, you're going out. There's no like... I mean, I get it. Hospitals have lots of rooms.
It was just pointless, like grind work. At that point.
It was, yeah. You're essentially trying to brute force the level, and I don't want to feel like if I'm in a survival horror game, I want to feel like I'm actively doing what I can to survive, while also being rewarded for going that little extra way.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't want the critical path to be such a weirdly winding deal. So I can agree with you on that point. Me personally, though, what I would change, I would actually change the amount of I would actually change the diversity of items, because I feel like there's like a number of different melee weapons. Yeah. There's a number of different gun upgrades. And the fact that melee is an actual option.
As a gun upgrade, you mean different gun, not
different
actually,
guns. Yeah. Right, you don't upgrade your gun. Like there's a pistol, a shotgun, and a hunting rifle.
Right.
And then there's like also 3 different melee weapons. I think one of the things that I liked about Resident Evil is that the weapon progression felt natural in the sense that you start off with a knife or a pistol, and then you found a shotgun, and then you might have found a grenade launcher, or if you're Jill, or you got your Magnum later on. But I think that but once you got those weapons, you kind of you elevated your normal. Yeah. So you went from your handgun to your shotgun. Right. Your shotgun became your primary weapon.
They piecemealed out the progression. Right, in a way that was pretty satisfactory.
They did, whereas
it was weird. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, whereas in Silent Hill, you're still getting handgun bullets all the way through the end of the game, what little there is, and it's
I distinctly remember getting a melee weapon later on. I wish I had that earlier.
Right, it's the fire axe that you find late in the game.
Good weapon, but it should have been in much sooner.
It should have been way earlier, and
because you start with a kitchen knife.
You start with a kitchen. Yeah, so you can find a kitchen knife in the diner, and then you find a lead pipe in a car. Yep. Then you can find a hatchet. Then you can, which I mean is
there's a hammer. Isn't there a sledgehammer?
Yeah. Well, there is, and it's just to me, I would have simplified the kit somewhat. Mm-hmm. Have a couple of weapons.
Okay.
Like, so gun, like handgun, shotgun, hunting rifle. Okay.
So that's fine, right?
That feels fine, but like, I don't need to have like 15 different melee weapons because
especially since they all felt kind of the same, didn't they?
They all kind of felt the same.
It was like the knife was like a single hand, and then the axe was a single hand but upgraded damage.
Yep.
And then the pipe was the two-handed slow, and then the axe or not axe
the fire hammer, the hammer sledgehammer axe thing. Yeah.
And it felt like it didn't really change the gameplay too much because it was technically like two weapon types.
Yeah.
And really like it was like +1 damage, +2.
Yeah. Well, exactly, and the other thing too is that once you get that fire axe, like you almost don't need a gun at some point because
I mean to at least avoid like melee damage.
Right, yeah, and it's like
close range because like that was the trade-off was melee weapons were infinite ammo, but you definitely had to expose yourself to a lot more risk.
Yeah, and I think that the later games kind of did it like better in terms of like giving you like a simplified kit, but like also something that was much more respectable for the for what you were doing because like in like 2 and 3, you only get a couple of guns, and then you have a couple of melee weapons, and it feels much more natural.
Yeah.
Because in a survival horror game, I'm not necessarily looking for I need that next weapon upgrade.
Right.
I want more healing items. I want more efficiency,
ammunition for the weapons you do have.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't want to waste time trying to find. Oh, I got my +1 to damage here.
Right. And it feels like you're just doing inventory work at that point.
Yeah, and again, since in Silent Hill, because you have unlimited inventory space, inventory management at that point, like, it's no longer a feature.
Yeah, just like pick whatever weapon you want to use.
But then at the same time, if you have a bunch of weapons that you need to scroll through, like, or a bunch of items, I just think, also the same thing with the healing items. There's the energy drink, which is a little bit of healing. Then there's the med pack, which is a lot of healing. Then there's the ampule, which is like full healing and some invincibility. Yeah. And it's like,
I definitely like stockpiled the ampules. Like I just chugged those.
Those were all saved for the final boss.
Right. This is the thing I have. I often have like issues with when it comes to modern games. When they give you a consumable, I just don't want to use it because I never know when I'm going to need it. At least in a survival horror game, in Resident Evil, it was pretty simple. It was either a green herb, and you can combine it to make a double green, or you can make the top one, which is triple green, or red and green. But you had low, medium, and high.
Yeah, but
so you kind of knew.
But it was all based off of like the same elements. So you were responsible for making the choice to either make it stronger or get a quick hit right then and there. Yeah. Whereas I don't want to have to sit here and manage like, oh, I've got this and I've got this, because then it also dilutes the items that you do fine. Right. And you're like, oh man, there's a healing oh, it's just an energy drink. I don't need an energy drink. Whereas in Resident Evil, you find a green herb, you're like, oh great, I can do something with this green herb even in a late game when I'm like,
can store it.
Because you can store it,
or you can combine it, that kind of thing. So,
exactly. So I would simplify like all of the item management stuff. There's just too much for me.
Okay.
So now we get into what is quickly becoming my favorite category here. We have the Rebecca Chambers Memorial Trophy for the, I guess you want to call it most over-the-top performance.
Is it performance, or is it I guess that was what the last one was.
Yeah,
it was the most ridiculous.
It's the most. It's the voice acting performance that just stuck out to you in the weirdest, oddest, worst ways.
Or any way for that matter.
All right. And again, our nominee list is very short because there's not that many people to talk.
The cast.
We have Harry Mason himself. He comes across as very dull at times. I don't know.
Captain Obvious.
We've got Sybil Bennett, the police officer woman. She is intense, but her dialogue is actually not bad. We've got Lisa Garland, who's always sounds like she's on the verge of tears or freaking out, which I think is relevant for her character.
Story.
Then we get Dr. Michael Kaufman, who is the biggest jackhole on the planet.
Yeah.
And then we come to probably my actual personal favorite, probably who I would give this to, Miss Dahlia Gillespie. Okay. What a performance. She is so over the top. She was hamming it. She was hamming it up. She was ham hawking it. That's how bad she was going.
Is that your pick there?
I would say Dahlia gets my vote for that.
I will tell you, good sir, that one person clearly stood out as the most redonkulous chatter box in that game, and it's got to go to your man and my man, Harry Mason.
Harry Mason.
Harry Mason. And the reason being is that like Dahlia came across as like a scenery chewing baddie, and I'm like, appropriate. Sybil Bennett came off as like a no nonsense cop with some concern, so handled pretty well as to be expected. So it's funny because they're all hitting the note that is kind of expected of them, and then Harry Mason just had such a deluge of like weirdly like delivered lines. It wasn't over the top the way like Resident Evil was kind of over the top, but like his to me was memorable. Like every time something happened in the game, I was like, tell me what your thoughts are, Harry. Just let me know what you have to say here. And he would always deliver it in such either a stilted or weirdly kiltered way. It was below what I would expect, right? Because I'd imagine, like in the booth, they'd be like, could you get that to me one more take? And they just didn't do that quite enough. And I wonder if they were just pressed for time. But to me, it was just... It was like the nightmare world itself, just this kind of weird, creepy valley, and I appreciated it in there. So for me, Harry Mason's the one. Is my vote for the
there's a case there's a case to be made that Harry Mason kind of paves the way for Silent Hill 2's protagonist James Sunderland, who is probably asleep the entire time he's actually recording his lines. It's
forgettable.
Yeah, it's very forgettable. The funny thing, there's some funny stuff about Silent Hill 2, but yeah,
we'll get into that in the next episode.
In the episode 2, yeah, we do for Silent Hill 2. I'm gonna stick with Dahlia, but I think Harry Mason is a worthy winner. So I would say out of the two of them, I would probably give it to you, Harry Mason. Congratulations, you are the second winner technically of the Rebecca Chambers Memorial Trophy. And speaking of voice acting, we're now going to talk about some of the best quotes.
Some of my favorite.
Oh my goodness. I pulled 5 here. Again, feel free if you remember more to want to add. I think we might want to add one. First off, that's strange. It's getting darker.
Classically
Harry
delivered.
Says when he's entering the alleyway at the beginning and he notices that
Captain
Obvious.
Oh yeah.
Dahlia in a flashback near the end when you're going through nowhere, she comes up. Herein lies the mother's womb, containing the power to create life.
I believe she twirled her mustache at that point too. She's like,
yeah, she was really classic hammy Dahlia.
Yeah.
Harry Mason, when he's kind of coming to grips with all the stuff that's going on, he says, "I don't want to think so. Maybe this is all happening in my head."
Captain Obvious again.
Really, Harry?
But delivered, again, just off enough. To make you go,
really?
Was that the best take?
Funny story about that. According to the producers themselves, a little tidbit here. The game itself was designed to have a very Jacob's Ladder feel. Oh. And if you don't know the movie stars Tim Robbins, early 80s. I can't remember off the top of my head when it was released. Mm-hmm. But he played a Vietnam War veteran who was wounded very early in the film and then jumps forward a few years to his life becoming really weird, and he starts to have some visions and whatnot. Very psychological.
Yeah,
and spoiler warning for a 30-year-old movie incoming in 3, 2, 1. Turns out Jacob never left Vietnam, and the entire majority.
He was actually a lettuce man.
He was a lettuce man. He was made out of water and plasmoids or whatever the hell lettuce is made out of.
No. Sorry.
But no, Jacob and Jacob's Ladder actually died in Vietnam, and he.
This was the last moments of his.
This 90% of the movie was his dying dream, a trope that has been utilized many times.
That's a great title. My Dying Dream.
My Dying Dream by Harry Mason.
I know, right? That's some rock band right there.
Another one here, going back to best quotes, is Sybil in the diner. She says, "Look, Harry, I really don't get what's going on, but if there's a chance we can save your daughter, I'm in." It's a nice little it's a nice little
funky and expository.
It is funky and expository. However, I will say one of her next lines probably for me gets the biscuit.
Here. Yeah, go ahead.
Sybil, as she's giving Harry her gun in the diner, she asks, "Have you got a gun? Take this and hope you don't have to use it. Now listen to me. Before you pull the trigger, know who you're shooting, and don't do it unless you have to. and don't go blasting me by mistake. Got it?
Yeah, that's a lot there.
Wonderful piece of foreshadowing.
It makes you go, did you really, if you had to put that much information up front, should you have given this person, this stranger,
exactly
a pistol?
You are a police officer.
Like, normally, if were I in her position, right, I'd be like, get behind me, chief. And then just walk out there with like a gun in each hand, just blasting fools. She's like, you know what I'm gonna do? You, whoever you are, and I don't know that you're a writer, but I assume you know how to use this. Here you go. When you could be double fisting it.
It's. I would say it's probably up there as maybe that should have aged the worst, because that is a titanic mistake made by a police officer.
But for me, that crosses the threshold into like that ham, that cheese, that sandwich zone where I'm like, yes, I like this. And so for me, that gets my vote.
You know what? I agree too, because it's a delicious piece of foreshadowing. It is really poorly delivered.
A lot of exposition.
And makes zero sense. That would be
action.
That's a thing that would never occur. I mean, ever. I don't. Yeah, right. I don't care. The cop would be like, "No, you stay behind me.
I don't know if you're hallucination.
Don't get. Yeah, exactly. Don't get me killed. Yeah. So now we're coming up to who won the game? Who in this game, or as an associated with the game? What is the shining piece? What won the game?
Right.
Is it our boy Harry Mason? Is it Cheryl / Alessa, as either she dies in the end, or she once again has her spirit reformed, her spirit and body put back together, and once again turned into a baby for the third time in her existence?
Yep. And given to Harry. So it's like his double daughter.
Exactly. You're my double daughter now. Is it Sybil in the good ending only? Because although a case could be made in the bad ending, she got off easy.
Right.
Fog?
Yeah.
Did Fog win this game because of all of the limitations? Or was it Silent Hill itself, the town of Silent Hill, that spawned a video game mythos that spanned so far 6-7 games?
You want my take?
Let's take
We'll
your
go with mine. So
like
right on that list, I feel like Silent Hill the town.
Silent Hill the town,
because the fog was a great feature of it, but not in every game afterward. They would incorporate some fog, but they sure used Silent Hill. In fact, there's that other game, like we talked about. Silent Hill Room was not originally a Silent Hill game.
It was made by Team Silent, but it was not meant to.
It was going to be its own thing, but they said, you know what, let's implement this. And I remember feeling that way too. When I played it, I was like, this has nothing to do. In fact, Silent Hill was like the next town over. So to me, that's the same thing with Wesker. Like in our last episode, it transcends its initial existence into something much more. Yeah. So the town almost it does feel like a character in its own way, doesn't it?
It's you know what, I would actually agree, because Silent Hill the town gets my vote as well, because it was a memorable place, and you know, not to spoil anything, it's the only game in the series that actually takes place in Silent Hill.
What?
Silent Hill 2 takes place like in an adjacent portion of Silent Hill. I think you maybe I'll need to go back and double check.
You go into Old Silent Hill.
You do go into Old Silent Hill, but it's not like the Silent Hill that we were made aware of. Silent Hill 3.
Not even in Silent Hill, you're right. They moved away.
They moved away. Well, actually, maybe they did go back.
No, they moved away from it because it's another town in like California or something.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm
it's
blown away.
It's so weird. And you know, Silent Hill 4: The Room doesn't take place in Silent Hill like you've mentioned before.
It's adjacent. There's like a billboard.
Oh, you know what? I'm wrong. Downpour absolutely goes back to Silent Hill.
Okay.
Murphy Pendleton escapes to Silent Hill Downpour. We probably will not be doing that game.
Oh no, bummer.
Well, I mean, okay.
Any excuse to jump on some of these for me.
Well, okay, yeah. So we can talk about that. That could be one for us.
We'll talk about that then, you and I. But so now onto our final category.
Final category
playable. Barely playable, unplayable.
Yes, if this game was released today, sight unseen, would this game be playable, barely playable, or unplayable?
All right, this one it's got some good highs, but man, they make you work for it. Honestly, this would end up in a junk bin and be an anomaly. Because it came out when it did, when there was very little like other games. I mean, they had like Alone in the Dark. They had Resident Evil 2 was, I think, getting ready to come in.
Well, at the time, Resident Evil 2 was already out.
Was it?
Yes, because I want to say that it was either with Resident Evil 2 or with Parasite E.
Oh, Parasite E.
Yeah, there was, because I remember there being a demo disc for Silent Hill.
I remember demo discs.
And it came out, it came out after Resident Evil 2. I think Resident Evil 3 was on the horizon at that point.
Well, to me, like, the departure from any other kind of genre, right? Because this wasn't just like a Silent Hill, or this wasn't a Resident Evil clone because of like its existentialness, because of its weird mysticism, its occult leanings. Like I said, this is what got me into like Lovecraft. So those elements are good, but like, oh man, we're talking serious problems. Like, so to me, even to go back, I believe like I said, I had like a Let's Play on, and I was watching it while playing it. And I was like, nope. I even fast forwarded it through the end of the elementary school. I was like, this is giving me flashbacks of how miserable it was being here. I'm just gonna skip ahead because there's a lot more game to go. And I'm even now, when I'm not even playing it, I don't want to be here. Yeah. And I can't say I wanted to do that near as much with Silent Hill 2, which I think. We'll have, if we do, I think we'll do a thing on it.
Yeah, we'll definitely do a thing on it. Yeah.
So I would call this one barely playable if you're a fan of the series and want to see where it begins. But honestly, it's kind of the weakest one, right? Like this is like the progenitor. Well, okay, maybe not weakest, but as the progenitor, it was great setting up this kind of like direction. But when you look at the things they have done after, granted, minus some of the ones that you would like to just glaze over, like this one isn't super necessary because the stories are all almost independent of each other. So
mostly, yeah. There's some connection between 1 and 3, and some connection between 2 and 4. But the connection between 2 and 4 really was just jammed right in there. It was fisted right into the back of it.
Well, like I said, if you're a hardcore fan and you want to see where it began, barely playable. It just good luck getting through the slog. Otherwise, unplayable. I'd pass on it.
Oh man!
As much as I love this game, as the series, like you really had to eat through like those 112 bites of dirt before you found something nice.
Okay, so for me, I'm of two minds of this. To me, I think that this game, if it came out today, could still be 100% playable.
Okay. I
mean, I think that the experience of playing it for the first time is something that I would basically say any fan of the survival horror genre, this is a game that you've got to play. Like, some people, if you're talking movies with someone and someone is like, oh man, I want to watch this director's work. Like, you can give them an entry point to say, start here and then go through their catalog. It wasn't the first game, but I think it was definitely the game that really legitimized the way that survival horror was done. Resident Evil 2 came out before this. It helped to refine the mechanics of the action-ish oriented survival horror. But I think Silent Hill was the one that really took the ball and ran with it. So I would say if you've never played it before, definitely give it a play. That being said, though, the controls, they're really slippery. The item placement is really bad. It's all over the place. Silent Hill's a wonderful town to explore, but once you realize that there's nothing there except like an item or maybe a tidbit of lore or a chasm where the road has completely been disintegrated, like you understand that you are in a place that you really don't want to be in. So you're not going to want to really explore, even though there's the potential of being quote unquote rewarded. And I just think that like with the sensibilities we have today, like I wanted to play this game when I was, when it first came out. I've played it a number of times in my life. I honestly say that the only reason I've played this game in the past 10 years
Yeah.
is because of this podcast. So I would actually agree with you that this game is kind of unplayable.
Okay.
Do yourself a favor. If you want to play the game to experience it for the first time, please do. Otherwise, watch somebody else do it.
Don't harm yourself.
Don't harm yourself. Watch somebody who wants to go through and really enjoy the scary nuance and put yourself at a safe distance. This game, I think, as much as I love it and as much as it really pains me, like I would probably play this game again, maybe in another couple of years.
Again,
but
as a fan of the series.
As a fan of the series.
Fan of the genre.
I would say that this may be hopefully this doesn't turn off a fan base. I agree. I think this game, if it came out today, would be unplayable.
But definitely like for like a Halloween spooky game, like it's got all the bases covered, creepy backgrounds, like tension, that sinking nauseous feeling that you're like about to turn a corner and horrible things are going to happen to you. This is definitely a game you survive.
Yeah, this is a game that you survive. So if you're a fan of these games, give it a run. I would suggest it. Matt, tenuously suggests it.
Right.
But otherwise, if you're not a fan of the series, if you're not a fan of the genre, just stay away.
Right.
Just, do yourself a favor. Watch somebody else do it. So that's going to go ahead and wrap things up for this episode of OMG Older Millennial Gamers. I'm Brian Olivier.
And I'm Matt Lotharius.
And go ahead, leave us a like, a little comment, and a subscribe button if you want to hear more from us. Tell us how we're doing. If you're enjoying what you're listening to, we would love to hear back from you. But until next time, we will be continuing Spoopy Month, and we might get a little crazy. Thanks for listening.